There they are! The traitors! The grudge-mongers! The vile, wretched Dowie scum that have fled the love of our ancestors! We stop this abomination that burrows into the rock! Royal Dwarves! The clans of Karazankar unite! Ready your axes! Clean the heads of every Dowie Tsar you come across! Burn their beards! Drag them! Drag them all!
So welcome everyone, Questine here with the Dwarves. Not the Chaos Dwarves, the regular Dwarves, the Forgotten Dwarves, the worthless Dwarves. Because when you have a race like the Chaos Dwarves just right next door, why in the world would you play a campaign as the regular Dwarves when Creative Assembly has done almost nothing for them? Oh yeah, they gave Dwarf Warriors a silver shield, and they also gave like regular dwarf lords as well as regiments in renown that are basically like dwarf warriors, a silver shield, Thanes included. Okay, that's what we're getting. Anything else substantial? Oh, Forik gets some bug fixes in his campaign. Poor Forik, he's been the worst dwarf legendary lord, or he started as the worst dwarf legendary lord from the beginning. Now he's much better, but still, is still a really bad situation for the regular dwarves. Let's talk about what the issues are and what needs to be improved. The growth of the dwarves is pretty terrible. Now, people have made all kinds of excuses about it. I mean, Karazakarek does have good growth, sure, or not good growth, decent growth. Let's just call it that. It's decent growth. There is much better growth for other factions. Like when you think of the fact Bretonia gets 60 growth on their minor settlements, let alone to 100 growth on their provincial capitals, yeah, it ends up being fairly ridiculous. It seems that with patch 3.0, Creative Assembly did very little in terms of changing factions, other factions, in terms of like how those factions work, the faction effects of legendary lords of other factions. Like Orion is still an overpowered piece of crap, for instance, as an example. There have been some changes, of course, in terms of starting positions, the major changes to the Arclands, all that. That is great, but the fact that they didn't touch other factions, in terms of their faction effects and the issues they have, is a bit of a downside, or a major downside as far as I'm concerned. If I want to delve a bit into conspiracy theories, maybe it's Creative Assembly not updating the dwarves in a deliberate fashion so that more people will buy the Chaos Dwarves. I mean, it is such a huge disappointment to get the Chaos Dwarves coming out, and the regular dwarves, what do we get? A silver shield on a unit that we don't want to use anyway in our campaign. I mean, it makes them better in melee. Finally, Dwarf Warriors are actually worth using in melee as opposed to Quarrelers, though a Silver Shield is not necessarily going to change that situation, because the Silver Shield is against ranged units. So, oh, you can use Dwarf Warriors against ranged units more. Yeah, but Quarrelers will generally win against most ranged units anyway in most campaigns, so why in the world would you recruit Dwarf Warriors? There's changes in terms of AI behavior in the campaign map, so Skarsnik is not just going to suicide himself over here very quickly, like by taking this element just as Forgrim is going to show up over there to ruin his day. That actually does improve Forgrim's campaign, because it means you can actually get Forgrim's grudge sorted out, I think. Though I wonder if you wipe out Skarsnik, do you achieve the success and get the Master Rune of Spite, or do you just have to spend five battles just sacking his capital? Because you can certainly defeat Skarsnik so quickly that you can't get the Master Rune of Spite from that. So, what are the issues with the dwarves? There's so many of them, I'm not sure exactly where to start. Though I've done a video on this, and I'm kind of going to repeat myself, but one, very limited unit recruitment. Extremely limited. The Chaos Dwarves have more unit recruitment options than you do. More unit recruitment slots than you do. They have a better research tree than you do. They have a much better economic system. I mean, forget the growth system. Let's talk about the material system, the gold system, the armament system. You know, everything that the dwarf faction should have been, maybe from the very start, that the Chaos Dwarves now have, and whereas you're still dealing with the old growth system in the game that just never really made that much sense for the dwarves to deal with from the very beginning. It actually makes a lot of sense for a dwarf campaign to have like substantial provincial capitals with minor settlements that are about outposts or materials, which is exactly what the Chaos Dwarves are doing. So you have very limited unit recruitment. Your provinces are going to grow very slowly. And the problem with that slow growth is not in the sense like, oh, you can't unlock the units quickly, because you do have all the units at tier 4. The problem is your economic output, because you're going to have fewer building slots. So your recruitment is actually going to be limited because of those fewer building slots, even in a settlement like Harris Akarak. That's the first issue with growth. You couple that with limited unit recruitment slots. Yes, you have a commandment. Yes, you can improve it with research, but it's still incredibly limited from the very beginning. And people say, oh, you can get an armory in every settlement, to which my reply would be, do you think I have the ability to get an armory in every settlement with the poor growth I have? And the limited economy as well that the dwarves have. The dwarves can get a good economy. They have an economy that can scale up very well in the end game. But early on, their structures are pretty expensive. Like, consider this. The greenskins spend 250 for 250 income. You spend 1,000 for 200 income. That's how bad the dwarves are. Where the greenskins of all races, have better economic output. So much for the industrial might of the dwarves, right? And then on top of that, their casualty replenishment is awful. As in non-existent. The only way to improve casualty replenishment with the dwarves, with the exception of playing Grumbrindle and getting his faction effects, is to get this building here. But this isn't the casualty replenishment building. This is a growth building, and it's not even the best growth in the world. On top of that, their research tree is still exactly the same as before. There's some useful stuff here, but consider that it takes you 49 turns. You can speed this up significantly with archivists and students, but it takes you 49 turns to get 3% casualty replenishment in one local recruitment capacity. As an idea, you can get 6% casualty replenishment for the Chaos Dwarves through, the military tree. You just need to get 500 armaments, and you get the prerequisite upgrade that gives you 10% or 5% upkeep for all your armies. So you're getting upkeep, and then right after that, you're getting 6% casualty replenishment. On top of the fact, you also get 6% casualty replenishment through a seat in the Tower Czar, and then your generic lords have the ability of getting casualty replenishment through their special skill line, because the regular lords for the Chaos Dwarves have a special skill line. What do the regular lords for the regular dwarves have? Squat. Yeah, it is that bad. I mean, your engineers, your Thanes, your runesmiths, Thanes and engineers in particular, are good as heroes, but your regular lords are just pretty pathetic. The rune lords are pretty solid, but compare that to the lore of magic of a shoot that the Chaos Dwarves have, the fact that they can reduce upkeep for hobgoblin units. Like, you have a choice. Like, you can reduce the upkeep of hobgoblin units, you can get casualty replenishment, you can improve some substantial units. And as for legendary lords with casualty replenishment, I mean, Astrogoth has 5% flat out. Zaytan gets 25% casualty replenishment through his special skill line, and an item he has that buffs casualty replenishment. Another great part is you can actually get items that improve your casualty replenishment as the Chaos Dwarves. So why in the world would you ever play the Dwarves? They're worthless, they're bad, they're terrible, they're crap, their economy is bad, their starting position is bad. I mean, it's not that it's challenging, quote-unquote. You think playing a Chaos Dwarf campaign isn't challenging when you get to deal with the Might of Grimgor? I can assure you it's far more challenging than any campaign of any Dwarf Legendary Lord in the game right now. But it's great because you have the tools needed to succeed with that, whereas as the regular Dwarves, you have very few units you can recruit, your economy is not going to support large armies. Any casualties you take in battle is going to be very substantial, so it means you're really pushed towards getting a lot of quarrelers in particular, so you can kill enemies before they even reach your lines, and you're pushed towards fighting a lot of battles manually, whereas I can play a lot of battles in a Chaos Dwarf campaign and auto-resolve them the battles I do play, and this is the great thing about having good casualty replenishment, it pushes you for more army variety, because there are units you wouldn't use otherwise because they take a lot of damage in either auto-resolve or manual battles, or both. Slayers are an example of that. But if you have good casualty replenishment, you can play with a lot of RP variety. Having a good economy means more armies. Having more unit recruitment slots, having good growth means more variety and a better playstyle. Like, you can get really powerful if you're playing the dwarves, but it's so boring and forgettable and dreadful, because all you really do initially, if you can't recruit quarrelers, yeah, you get dwarf warriors and miners with blasting charges. By the way, they nerfed the miners with blasting charges a bit, not a significant amount. And then once you get quarrelers and artillery, that's all you're going to get. Quarrelers and 2 free grudge throwers per army. And those are the armies you're going to use throughout the entire campaign. Just look at that situation compared to the Chaos Dwarves. As the Chaos Dwarves, you get a lot of different units, because hobgoblins are great early on, but they won't scale very well in the end game. So then you start getting artillery, lots and lots of artillery. You get blunderbusses, you get Chaos Dwarf warriors, you get great weapons. You get a huge variety of units in your armies as the Chaos Dwarves, whereas the Dwarves, the best thing and the only really good playstyle that you have working for you is to spam quarrelers and artillery. It's the most effective way. Whereas with the Chaos Dwarves, yeah, you spam hobgoblins, but that's only going to take you so far. And once you get the better units, you'll use the better units. Like, it's so fun to just run around with Fireborn and Centaur and Kadai destroyers in your campaign, as opposed to this really bad and miserable playstyle that the regular dwarves do have. So I had hoped that Creative Assembly would do some updates with the dwarves. They gave us missile block chance on warriors. That is brilliant. Costine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.